Hello friends, this video on Cell, the Unit of Life, Part 12 is brought to you by examfear.com. No more fear from exam. Yes. Okay, so this was about the different layers of cell wall. Now we will talk about another important, you can say a part of cell wall, which is called plasmodesmata. So now we are going to talk about plasmodesmata. So let us see what they are. They are tiny holes through cell wall and middle lamella. So here if you see in this picture, you can see some tiny holes here. So these are nothing but plasmodesmata. So why do we have these holes here now? As I said, middle lamella is going to connect, or they are going to join two adjacent cells. Now those two cells, if they want to communicate with each other, there has to be some path to communicate. Communicate in the sense, obviously the cells will not talk, but at least they should be able to exchange materials amongst each other. So how do they do that? So for that purpose, there are tiny holes through the cell wall and middle lamella through which their cytoplasms can get connected. So it connects the cytoplasm of adjacent cells. So this is your cytoplasm. So through this hole, it will get connected on this side with the adjacent cell. So they can exchange materials through these tiny holes. Okay, now let us look at the function of cell wall. So we saw the structure of cell wall, the different layers in the cell wall. And now let us see what are the functions. Why do we have? What is the significance of cell wall? They provide structural strength to plants. As I said, since they are very rigid, tough and hard due to the presence of cellulose, they provide a lot of mechanical and structural support to plants. Prevent bursting of cells in hypotonic solution. So what is hypotonic solution? A solution where the concentration of water is more than that inside the cell. So this is a hypotonic solution. Now, generally what happens when you put a cell inside a hypotonic solution? Water will start getting inside the cell because the concentration of water is higher in the solution. So water will start moving into the cell. Now as more and more water start entering into the cell, what happens? The cell starts swelling up. Now if too much water comes inside the cell, that will exert a lot of pressure on the cell walls and the cell might burst. So in order to prevent that, you have the cell wall. So cell wall is like an additional support because plasma membrane will allow water to pass through it. And finally, if it is too much, it might burst. So you have this additional cell wall so that whenever too much of water starts entering inside the cell, it will exert some pressure on the cell walls. So this water which is entering will exert some pressure on the cell wall, and the cell wall will also exert a counter pressure. Therefore, the plant cell will be able to withstand greater changes in surroundings. And due to the presence of the cell wall, plant cells can withstand greater changes in surroundings when compared to animal cells. Because there is a possibility if you put an animal cell in the same situation, the cell might burst because they do not have the cell wall. But in case of plant cells, due to the presence of cell wall, it might prevent bursting in hypotonic solution. Helps to connect neighboring cells, as I said, by the presence of tiny holes called plasmodesmata. Provides protection against injury and invasion. So since it is a rigid, tough layer, so it also acts as an additional protection. So with this, we ended our discussion on cell wall. Now let us quickly have a comparison between cell wall and cell membrane. What are the differences between the two? So as I said, cell wall is present only in plant cells, whereas cell membrane is present in both plant and animal cells. Cell wall is non-living, whereas cell membrane is living. Cell wall is permeable, that is, it allows all the particles to pass through it, whereas cell membrane is selectively permeable. It allows only selected particles. Cell wall is hard, rigid, whereas cell membrane is thin, delicate and flexible. So these are some of the differences between cell wall and cell membrane. Now let us quickly look at the differences between the primary and secondary cell wall. Just now we spoke about them, right? So primary cell wall is something which is present in the young cells. So young cells will not have secondary cell wall. So secondary cell wall will be present only in the matured cells. Primary cell wall, it is located between middle lamella and the secondary cell wall. As I said, this is your plasma membrane, this is your secondary cell wall, this is your primary cell wall, and this is your middle lamella. So basically this is your middle lamella, the outermost one. Inside that you have your primary cell wall. Inside that you have your secondary cell wall. And inside that you have your plasma membrane or cell membrane, whatever you call it. So when you talk about primary cell wall, it is located between middle lamella and secondary cell wall. But when you talk about secondary cell wall, it is located between primary cell wall and cell membrane. Primary cell wall is single layered, whereas secondary cell wall is multi-layered. So this secondary cell wall, which is formed with maturity of the plant, they again have sub-layers. So there are multiple layers of this secondary cell wall, but primary cell wall is just one layer. Primary cell wall is comparatively elastic and flexible, whereas secondary cell wall is rigid. So it is more rigid. That is why in case of young plants, what do you see? The young plants, they are a little soft and tender, but as they grow and become mature, they become more hard, rigid and tough. So with that, thank you. Please visit www.examfear.com to watch more videos, attempt free online test, get free study material, find tutors and mentors. Thank you once again.